Welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. Brought to you by Blue Sky Business Consulting. We discuss 5 questions in about 15 minutes.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. We're glad that you've chosen to join us and to listen and watch this podcast, and I'm very excited to welcome my good friend, our guest today. This is Rich Tyson. He is the founder and CEO of CEObuilder out of Orem, Utah, and he's also just published a brand new book, very exciting, called Align and Execute. So, Rich, thank you so much for taking time to join me on the podcast. What would you like the audience to know about Align and Execute?
Well, first of all, what it looks like. So this is the book. And if your viewers can see this, the subtitle is maybe more important than the title. The subtitle is, It's All About the Money, But It's Not. And so this book is really written from the perspective of the way we accomplish great things, but great things being more importantly in the core purpose that you have for your organization. And even a little deeper than that, what is your core purpose for yourself as a leader? If you align from your own core purpose all the way through the process of making sure you have a great mission, vision, and values for the company, and then recruit properly to people that buy into that, so they actually start with a higher level of engagement and then build their competency and engagement, that gives you a great operation which delivers customer outcomes, which rings the cash register. And now we can ring the cash register other ways, but I believe this is the best way because it not only fulfills great corporate purpose, but it really is a measure of how you fulfill your life. And that's what the book is really built about or written about.
Great. Oh, I love that. And I love that you incorporate some ideas about just not business, but life and how the two intertwine. Because for any of us that have started our own business, we know how challenging that can be to more or less separate the two. And in some cases, you don't. You just don't separate the two. They're just part of who you are. But you can't let one overshadow the other too much. So
well said. Well said.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again for sharing your insights on the book, and we'll talk more about that here in a few minutes. Let's go ahead and get started with our questions for this episode. Rich, it happens occasionally that teams or employees will kind of fall into a little bit of a lull. How can leaders infuse some energy into their team?
Well, I think your insight is tremendous there because I actually just wrote an article that's in the Utah Business Journal on, I called it entropy, but it's really, we kind of get into a flow of things, and maybe you could even relate it to New Year's resolutions. We're a third of the way into the new year. Most of those New Year's resolutions for most people are gone. And so it's that lull you're talking about. I think that's a kind of a natural entropy. We just kind of lose the pace, we lose the engagement. And so how do we get it back? I think you've got to go back first and foremost to core purpose again and say, okay, let's revisit, speaking as a leader, let's revisit what we're really here about, and let's do a little bit of evaluation of where we are and how we can revise. Maybe we've set some goals, some objectives that are a little beyond us. Let's rein it back in, reset, and get going again. And as a leader, infuse not only the purpose, but your own enthusiasm for what you're doing and your optimism that your people can do it. Again, we're going to have lulls. They're going to happen. But part of the role of leadership is to make sure that when we're in those valleys, we can still see the mountain peak and still get there.
Oh, I like that. I really like that analogy you shared at the end about even when we're in the valley, look for the mountain peaks. I think that's fantastic. All right, question number 2. Rich, how do you or other leaders promote learning in a company?
Well, I think you have to start by example. You have to be a learner. And your team will discern that. They will know whether you are constantly evaluating yourself and revising in the sense that, hey, what can I do to be continuous in my improvement? And learning has got to be a key piece of that. And so part of it is setting the example that you are a student of your business, a student of human relationships, a student of emotions, all of those things that go into running a great business. You've got to show that example. But Beyond that, I think what you can do is infuse in your organization opportunities for people to learn. Some of my clients have done some great things with that. They've had the blessing of suggesting to their people, all right, we're all going to read a book, or we're all going to read several books, and then we're going to have a lunch and learn where we talk about the book, or we give you as an employee an opportunity to be on stage and tell about the book, what you've learned, what you liked, what you didn't like. That begins to build that sense of enthusiasm for learning. And I've had some great clients that have done this in some significant ways that have even said, hey, look, it's not just about learning what will make our business better, it's what will make our communities better. And so pursue learning opportunities that may be outside the business. Some of that's actually led some of those employees to move on to other and different things. But I think that's still more positive than the failure to have a learning environment.
Agree. It is hard sometimes if we promote learning and development and skill acquisition, whatever it is, and then those employees find a better opportunity elsewhere.
Yeah,
But you're absolutely right. We have to provide those opportunities. We have to nurture them, and we have to set the example. We have to just be willing to continue learning, especially in such a fast-paced world. It feels like things move so quickly. There's new things coming out all the time. We have to be willing to kind of stay abreast of all of that. So I love that.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. Well, question number 3, what's one tip that you have for effective delegation?
Too much of delegation is dumping. Uh, it's, hey, I got too much to do. I'm going to throw it over the fence on you, you take it, and I'll hope you get it right. And if you don't, then I have somebody to blame. Uh,
Right.
these are some of the counterfeits of good delegation. And so I think it begins with a clarity of roles, understanding what your role is as a leader and saying, okay, this is a piece of that that can not only help me by somebody else taking it on, but it will grow them. And because I am concerned about their growth, I'm going to make sure we start right. I'm going to make sure that we define the role very carefully, that we know what the outcomes are that we want, that we understand at least conceptually what kind of activities have to occur to get to those outcomes, and then that we set up an accountability system that not only measures what the delegatee has to do and accomplish, but also if I'm the delegator, it puts me on the spot to be a sustainer. So I'm not just throwing it over the fence and saying, hope that works out. I'm checking back in. I'm saying, how can I help? If I'm perceiving that there are some things that aren't working, rather than getting into the blaming mode, I say, okay, we own this together. How can we together fix it? What can I do to be more supportive and sustaining? I've actually built this into job descriptions that I've designed where I've said, okay, here's all the things, the outcome that you need to accomplish. Here's the activities that we need to have occur. But then there's the part, how do I sustain you? That's built into your job description so that when we have a performance review, it's how well have you done in getting the outcomes? How well have you done the activities that were necessary? And how well have I sustained you? So that we don't fail to recognize that even though I delegated it, I'm still responsible. Kind of the old Harry Truman, the buck does stop here, not over across the wall. So that's kind of my view of it, Sean.
Oh, I love that. I think it's a great way to think about delegation, that we don't just dump it on somebody, but we help them along the process. I like that word sustain, that we're not just kind of off to the sideline there, but we're kind of hand in hand with them to a certain degree. And I love it. It's difficult. Delegation can be very difficult because so much of it depends on that relationship between the two. But I think you've articulated that very well in some ways to really think about that. So good information for the listeners and the viewers. Well,
Thank you.
very good. Question. Were you going to say add one more thing or?
Oh, no, that's fine.
Okay. Question number 4. How can a leader effectively communicate purpose and vision to their team or their company? And this kind of ties into our number 1 question earlier, but how would a leader communicate that in a really effective manner?
Well, a great leader once said that I will, I hope I say this right, Sean. I may misquote it a little bit, but it's uh, bear your witness of what you're all about, and if necessary, use words. You've heard that quote a different way, I know. But my point here is that you got to live your purpose. And if you are living it every day, and I put this way to my CEOs that I've coached over the years, it's one thing to get in on paper what a great purpose is. That's important. You should do that. You got to write it down or it doesn't exist. But then you've got to speak the words, you've got to behave, you've got to function, you walk the talk. And if you're doing that, you're going to see that your people eventually say, hey, this is what we're really about. In my book, I've just written about Herb Kelleher, the late founder of Southwest Airlines. And at the core of Herb Kelleher was he loved people. And he said, we have to have an airline that reflects our love of people. And so how did he get that through to his people? He was out and about all the time showing that. He was a guy that one of his associates said, Herb would come up and give you a big hug, and if you weren't careful, he'd kiss you. You know, uh, you know, everything he did reflected that love. Even as he would get into some pretty tense situations occasionally with a competitor, he would say, well, let's resolve this by arm wrestling. And here's the CEO of Southwest Airlines arm wrestling with American Airlines chief or whatever. And it was, hey, at the end of it, big hugs. Okay, we can resolve our differences, the things that we're fighting of that we may even be litigating on without having to behave in ways that are inappropriate. And so this guy lived it. And I think I've said CEO stands for Chief Executive Officer. It also should stand for Chief Evangelist Officer, that you are evangelizing that
Yes.
purpose, and you got to live it every day. And there are days when you don't like to get out of bed, but
Right.
you're carrying this role. And Simon Sinek calls it Chief Visionary Officer. He's CVO, but you got to jump out of bed and say, okay, I own this every day. I need to be there for my people. There are going to be times when we're going through real tough times, a COVID-19 hits or something. Somebody's got to be the visionary that just says a purpose is sound. We may even have to change the way we get at that purpose and accomplish it, but we are okay. We will set that standard and that pace for doing it the right way. And so I think so much of it is about just living it. I have had some that I've worked with where we've helped them get that purpose articulated, and it goes in a binder or a book on the shelf, and you don't see it
Right.
again. And it's like,
Right.
hey, that really turns out to be somewhat worthless. You got to live it. But if your people feel it, then you give them something to believe in. And when we talk team engagement, it's, hey, yeah, we know we need to make money. We know we need to serve a customer. We know all those things. But we come here every day because we have a purpose that is so incredibly important. If I could share one last experience with you,
Sure.
I had a client who I preached this to, and he said, Rich, I don't want to hear any of that stuff. He says, you're just here to help me make money. All I want to focus on in every coaching session is the financials, nothing else, and how we can improve the financials. I said, okay, I understand what I've been hired to do. Over a period of months, he was making a lot of money. In fact, he was actually one who received a high award by the governor of the state for his business. Uh, then a tragedy struck in his business. His production manager, who was really his chief operations guy, this guy died in a boating accident. And so over the next few months, as we got past that, even though we were focused on the financials, as it turns out, things just started going wrong, and he started losing key employees. And and finally, I thought I've got to figure out what's going on. I asked him, he was getting desperate. He asked me if I would go out and get on the plant floor and talk to people, and I did. And what I discovered was that his chief operating officer was the visionary of the business. He had created a sense of high purpose in what they were doing, and his people loved him, and they loved doing the things that he was enticing them and encouraging them to do. And as a result of that, while the CEO and I were talking only about the financials, this guy was illuminating purpose on the plant floor. When he went away, nobody was doing that anymore, and it fell apart. And
Wow.
so it just became a testimony to me that, hey, you've got to have that chief visionary officer or that chief evangelist. It may not even be the CEO. It may not be the president or the owner of the company, but somebody has got to be that energy that makes this happen. That keeps engagement alive.
Great comments just across the board because it's something you said in the middle there um, happens more often than I think people are willing to acknowledge, and that is that they go to the effort to create a purpose statement, a vision statement, and then they put it in a book, put it on a shelf, they put it in vinyl on the wall of the entrance to the company, whatever it may be, but they don't live it, they don't talk about it, they don't use real world examples to help the employees see it and feel it and know how to really execute on it. And to share that story that you did about that's such a tragedy because it should have come all the way through the top. You know, we won't get into it here, but we talk about alignment. And clearly there was some good alignment from the COO down, but the CEO was kind of missing out on that. And
Yeah,
so when the COO tragically departed, um, it left a big hole, obviously, and
yeah.
that left
I have one other thing to share with you on that,
yeah.
and that is that the importance of stories. Every company within the context of what they're doing has stories. Hopefully, those stories align with the purpose. If they don't, that becomes problematic. But I have suggested to many of my clients, knowing your purpose, look for the stories within your own organization that support and sustain that purpose, and then highlight those in a special way. And one way that, and I can't take total credit for this, I saw this at a client many years ago. They had decided to do a wall of fame. And so as you came into the front door of the company, they had the wall behind the receptionist full of photographs of their people smiling and receiving some kind of little plaque and award. And then the story was there next to it on the framed document. And it told the story of how they had sustained the great purpose of the organization. And it became part of the company culture to get your name and your face up on that wall, the way that your story had helped create and sustain the purpose of the company. It was phenomenal. And
Awesome.
the first day I walked through the door, this was a new client. I said, "Wow, that is so cool." And he said, "You don't know the half of it." And I said, "Well, give me the other half." And
Yeah.
and he said, when we have customers come here, we like to give plant tours so they can see what we do for them. And he said the first thing they see is the Wall of Fame. And he said I always direct them to, hey, read about what Ruben did or Bob did or Sally did, and give them a few minutes just to absorb our culture. And he said it is the greatest sales piece in the world because
Oh
they,
yeah.
wow, I see how this company makes this happen. I want to be part of this. He said, our salesmen just can't wait to get somebody to bring them in for a plant tour.
Oh,
So,
that's a great story. Great story. And that's such a good example of what leaders can do to help their people see and feel, and in this case, the clients, the prospective clients, where they can see and feel the vision and the whole, just the purpose of the company and what it is that they're trying to accomplish. I love that. Thank you for sharing those great stories. All right, well, last question, and this is a fun one that we always like to end on, and I know you've got some great baseball stories, but share with us a fun or favorite baseball memory that you have.
well, I'll tie it in with a memory, but I want to maybe illustrate a principle first of all, if that's okay.
Sure.
One of the things, and this kind of goes to living your purpose. Part of my purpose is to inspire and facilitate and help people to achieve their potential. And I think to do that, one of the great things about baseball is every player has at bats. And so every day is an at bat for each of us. We have an opportunity to get up and swing the bat. Now, some days we may hit foul balls or strike out or fly out to left field, but there are other times when we'll get base hits and maybe even some home runs. And so if we greet every day as an at bat, I think that is a positive way to look at life. I'm not a youngster anymore, but every day is still an at bat, and it keeps me excited about living and serving others and doing what I need to do. So that's a principle. Now, what is the great memory I have? I guess if you go clear back to Little League, It was one of my at-bats. I was facing a young man on the mound who was the dominant pitcher in the league. Uh, I don't know what's happened with him, but it wouldn't have surprised me if he made it all the way to the majors. He had an incredible fastball and nobody could touch it. And I had struck out several times against him. But I came up against him, and this was in Japan. I was living in Japan as a kid, and I was afraid of him because he threw such a good fastball. I was afraid he'd hit me.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I got up, and again, having struck out several times, my confidence wasn't real high, but I decided I'm going to do my best. And he piped a fastball to me, and I hit the ball, and it flew out over the center field fence, hit the scoreboard, and knocked all the numbers off the scoreboard.
Are you
And,
kidding?
and
That's like from The Natural.
oh, it was a great at bat. I ran around the bases, excited, whooping it up. When I got to home plate, the pitcher was there to greet me. I thought maybe he was going to punch me in the nose or something. And as I got there, he gave me a big hug and he said, "That's the best hit I've ever seen." And so the at bat for me was first just celebrating my own prowess. But
Sure.
afterwards, I had learned a bigger lesson. Here was a gracious kid who said, "Hey, most people can't touch me, and you did it. Congratulations, buddy." And they're the same age, so it wasn't like it was an adult doing that, but I was touched by him in ways that he certainly probably didn't know then, and certainly wouldn't know now. But it was a great experience for me. So that's probably the historic one, Sean. But
I love that one. That's a great story for a whole bunch of reasons that you just illustrated. But yeah, it's not very often that you have a very gracious pitcher that just gave up a home run to come down and off the mound there and say hi and
yeah,
congratulations. But that's a great story. I love that one. In
I
Japan,
don't know if
nonetheless.
it's the only home run that was ever hit on him, but it was the only one I ever hit.
Well, yeah, and I think part of why I like the story is that you had to conquer some inner fear there. You had to kind of say, you know what, I'm going to just do my best. We're going to figure this out, and you did. So I love that. Well, Rich, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to jump on the podcast with me and to talk about your book. How can people get a hold of you, and where can they find the book too?
Well, the book can be ordered on Amazon. I am actually right now recording the Audible version of it. Uh, that is a painful at bat for me, but I'm working my way through it. I'm getting close to the end, so that will be available. But it's available in ebook form. It came out day one, February 27th. Was an international bestseller on that day, so I'm grateful for that.
Congratulations.
Um,
Yeah.
but you can get the ebook. Soon will be able to get the Audible, but the paperback is there. I believe we're priced at $24.99. You can get the book that way, and I would love to have people read it and anxious to have reviews and feedback. So you can also get a hold of me through my website, www.ceobuilder.com, and it references the book there. I think right now that we've got it channeled back to Amazon to buy it, but we'd find a way for you to buy it if you got a hold of us. And then finally, I'm happy to hear from anybody. My email address is rich@ceobuilder.com. So any of that's fine. And I'm really anxious to get feedback on the book. I'm hopeful it's positive, but on the other hand, any feedback is well taken here. So we
Very
look
good.
forward to hearing from folks.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And congratulations on the existing success of the book, international bestseller and so forth, as well as future success of the book. I'm excited
Thank
for
you,
you.
Sean.
Well, thank you very much, Rich. Appreciate you being here. And thanks to everybody who tunes in and subscribes and listens carefully or watches carefully, either way. We're so grateful that you're part of our community of people who would like to lead teams better. So thank you so much for joining us and have a great day.
This is Sean Richards with the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. For more ideas, go to teamengagementpodcast.com. We also invite you to follow or subscribe to our podcast wherever you may be listening or watching. Is your business thriving? Go to tbs-score.com to find out. Thanks for joining us today. Have a great day.